Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are diving into something really important, the future of AI, and why everybody's talking about the need for regulation all of a sudden. So, we've got some excerpts here from a document that lays out some pretty serious concerns about how fast AI is developing and what we need to do about it, like now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting because even the experts in the field are saying we need to act now. They specifically say the next 18 months are really make or break for getting policies in place.
18 months. Whoa, that's not a lot of time to get everything in order. But what's got everybody so spooked? Is it like killer robots or something?
Not quite killer robots, but the document does paint a picture of what could happen if we don't put some safeguards in place. And it's not just about stopping bad things from happening. It's also about making sure we can still benefit from all the good that AI can do.
So it's like a balancing act. We need to control the risks, but not like squash all the potential that AI has.
Yes, exactly. The document argues that if we get well-designed regulations in place now, that could be the key to unlocking AI's potential while keeping those risks in check.
Yeah.
But if we wait too long, we might end up with regulations that are rushed and ineffective, and they could even end up stifling innovation.
So it's like strike while the iron's hot,
Right.
get those regulations in place before things get out of hand. But what kind of risks are we talking about specifically? The document doesn't just like speak in these vague terms, does it?
No, it actually gets into specifics, which I think is what makes it so compelling. For example, it highlights how AI is getting incredibly good at coding.
Really?
Yeah, you might be surprised by just how fast AI is actually getting better at things like writing code. The document gives an example of something called the SW bench, which is basically a test to see how well AI can solve like real-world coding problems.
So it's like they're giving AI a coding exam.
Exactly. And the result's pretty amazing. In a little over a year, AI's performance on this benchmark has jumped from solving like a tiny 1.96% of the problems to a whopping 49%.
Wait, almost 50%. That's insane. They're really that good at coding already.
It's pretty remarkable how quickly it's improving. And the document even names specific AI models and how they've evolved, like Claude 2, Devin, and Claude 3.5 Sonnet is really like watching them level up in real time. And that rapid development is exactly why the document is stressing we need to act now.
Okay, I'm starting to see why everyone's so concerned. So coding is one thing. What else is AI getting good at that's causing all this concern?
Well, cybersecurity is a big one. The document cites internal findings that show that AI models can already assist in like cyber offense tasks.
Whoa, so they're not just writing code, they're potentially using it for like hacking and stuff. That's a little unsettling.
Yeah, it is concerning. What's particularly concerning is that they predict that future AI models, the ones with more advanced planning abilities, could be even more effective in this area. And it's not even just about like stealing data or disrupting systems. It's about the possibility of these large-scale attacks that could cripple critical infrastructure or even cause like physical harm.
Okay, now I'm officially freaked out. But it sounds like this document isn't just trying to like fearmonger. They're proposing solutions too, right? I keep seeing this responsible scaling policy thing pop up. What's the deal with that?
So essentially, a responsible scaling policy, or RSP, is a proactive way to manage AI risks. The document talks about how Anthropic, which is an AI company, has implemented its own RSP and what it's learned from that experience.
So it's like a set of rules for developing AI responsibly, sort of like a code of ethics.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's about building safety into the development process from the very beginning, rather than trying to just tack it on as an afterthought. The document outlines two core principles of Anthropic's RSP: proportionality and iterative development.
Okay, break those down for me. Proportionality and what was the other one?
Iterative.
Okay.
Proportionality means that the safety and security measures should scale up. As AI capabilities reach certain like thresholds, think of it like levels in a video game. As the AI gets more powerful, you unlock new safety protocols to match the increased risk.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You adjust the safety measures based on how advanced the AI is.
Exactly. And the document highlights that different levels of AI capability are going to require different levels of oversight and control. And then there's the iterative part, which means the policy is constantly being reevaluated and adjusted as AI technology keeps evolving. It's not a static set of rules, it's a dynamic system that adapts to new challenges and discoveries.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like you're constantly learning and improving,
Right.
just like the AI itself.
Yeah, and that's a key point.
Yeah.
The document emphasizes that we can't just set some rules and then forget about it. We need to be constantly monitoring
Evaluating.
and adjusting our approach to AI safety as the technology continues to change.
Okay, so these RSPs seem like a good place to start, but are they enough on their own?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The document acknowledges that while RSPs are a valuable tool, they're not a replacement for actual regulation.
So they're like a stepping stone
Yeah,
to something more comprehensive.
exactly. The document argues that RSPs can provide a solid foundation, and even like a blueprint, for what effective AI regulation could look like.
All right, so let's talk regulation then. What would that look like according to this document? So we're talking like government regulations, laws, that sort of thing. What would that actually look like?
Well, the document lays out three key elements for what it considers to be effective AI regulation: transparency, incentivizing safety and security, and simplicity and focus.
Okay, let's break those down. We talked about transparency, meaning that companies would need to be upfront about their safety measures and the risks that are involved. But how do we actually incentivize them to prioritize safety? It can't all just be about good intentions, can it?
No, definitely not. Good intentions aren't enough. The document suggests a couple of interesting mechanisms. One idea is for regulators to clearly define the specific threats that those companies' responsible scaling policies need to address.
So it's like giving them a checklist of potential problems and saying, okay, show us how you're going to deal with these.
Exactly. It sets a clear baseline for safety without being overly prescriptive about how those companies should achieve it. It encourages them to come up with creative solutions within a framework of safety.
I like that. It still allows for innovation, but with some guardrails in place. What about this second element then? Incentivizing safety. Are we talking about like gold stars for good behavior?
Well, maybe not gold stars, but the document suggests some concrete incentives. One idea is like a tiered system, where companies with more robust safety policies get certain benefits or recognition.
Ah, so like a gold standard for AI safety that companies can try to achieve. I like that. It creates a clear target and encourages that race to the top that the document mentioned.
Exactly. And the goal here is to create a system that rewards responsible behavior and incentivizes companies to actually go above and beyond just the bare minimum. We want them to see safety as competitive advantage, not just a box to check.
That makes a lot of sense. What about the third element then? Simplicity and focus. Why is that so important when it comes to AI regulation?
Well, imagine a world where the regulations are so complicated and so convoluted that even the experts can't understand them.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. It would be a bureaucratic nightmare, probably wouldn't be very effective, and it could even stifle innovation if everyone is too busy trying to decipher the rules.
Exactly. And the document really stresses this point. AI regulations need to be clear, concise, and easy to understand. They need to focus on the most critical risks without getting bogged down in all this unnecessary bureaucracy.
It's like that saying, keep it simple, stupid. Sometimes the most straightforward solutions are the best.
Absolutely. And in this case, simplicity also means more transparency and accountability. When the regulations are easy to understand, it's easier for the public to hold companies and policymakers accountable for actually following them.
So it sounds like this document is advocating for a very balanced approach to AI regulation then, one that prioritizes safety without stifling innovation.
Yeah, and they emphasize that there isn't necessarily one right way to achieve that balance. The key is going to be finding a proposal that a wide range of stakeholders can all agree on. It's going to require collaboration and compromise from everyone.
Okay, so back to this ticking clock then. This document keeps hammering home this urgency of the situation. They're saying the next 18 months are critical. So what needs to happen in that time frame to make sure we get this right?
Well, the document is calling for a really coordinated effort between policymakers, the AI industry, safety advocates, civil society, lawmakers. They all need to come together and work together to develop a regulatory framework that actually addresses those real risks of AI without hindering its potential benefits.
That sounds like a tall order. Getting all those different groups to agree on something as complex as AI regulation, that's like herding cats.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. But the document argues that it's a challenge we absolutely must overcome. The stakes are too high to ignore. And it's not just a national issue either. The document also stresses the importance of international cooperation and information sharing.
Right, because AI doesn't respect borders. If one country develops a dangerous AI system, it could potentially affect the entire world.
Exactly. So we need to be working together to find global solutions to this global challenge. And while the document focuses mainly on the U.S. context, they are encouraging similar regulatory efforts in other countries that are starting to grapple with these same issues.
So it's clear this isn't just some abstract futuristic problem. The risks posed by AI are very real, And they're happening right now.
The document makes that very clear. They give real-world examples of how AI is already being used in ways that could have some pretty serious negative consequences, particularly when it comes to things like cybersecurity
Yeah.
and those CBRN scenarios. Remember how we talked about AI getting really good at coding?
Hmm.
Well, that skill could very easily be exploited for malicious purposes.
Right, like using AI to create incredibly sophisticated malware or to launch these large-scale cyber attacks. And their growing knowledge of biology and chemistry is equally concerning, especially when you consider the potential there for the development of bioweapons or other really dangerous substances.
Yeah, it paints a pretty sobering picture. It's like we're standing at a crossroads. We have this incredibly powerful technology that has the potential to do some really amazing things, but it also has the potential to cause immense harm if it's not developed and used responsibly.
So it's a bit of a tightrope walk then, trying to harness the power of AI, but also keep it under control. So how do we translate this urgency into concrete action then? What can we as individuals do to make a difference in this conversation?
That's a great question. And it's one that the document kind of indirectly addresses, I think, first and foremost. We need to stay informed, read articles, listen to podcasts like this one, and really educate ourselves
Yeah.
about the potential benefits and risks of AI.
Knowledge is power, right? The more we understand about AI, the better equipped we'll be to advocate for its responsible development and use.
Absolutely. And speaking of advocating, don't be afraid to make your voice heard. Contact your elected officials. Participate in public forums. And really engage in discussions
Yeah.
about AI ethics and regulation.
So it's not just about passively consuming information, it's about actively shaping the conversation.
Exactly. We all have a stake in the future of AI, and we need to make sure our voices are heard. The future of AI is not predetermined. It's something that we are all shaping together.
Well said. This has been a really thought-provoking discussion, and you've done a fantastic job breaking down these really complex issues in a way that's easy to understand.
It's been my pleasure. I think
Yeah.
it's so crucial to have these conversations and to try to demystify the world of AI a little bit. It's
Oh.
not just a topic for tech experts. It's something that affects all of us.
Absolutely. And on that note, let's shift gears a little bit and explore some of those potential solutions in more detail. What would a future with responsible AI regulation actually look like? Okay, so let's get down to like the nuts and bolts then. What would a world with responsible AI regulation actually look like? I mean, it's all well and good to talk about this transparency and these incentives, but how do those ideas translate into like real world policies?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the document does offer some concrete suggestions. For one, when it comes to transparency, it's not enough for companies to just say, oh yeah, we're being responsible. There has to be a way to actually verify that they're following through on those promises.
So it's not just like taking their word for it. There needs to be some kind of oversight.
Exactly. The document talks about the need for things like independent audits or like third-party reviews to make sure companies are actually putting those responsible scaling policies into practice. It could even involve like some level of government oversight, similar to how the FDA regulates food and drugs, to make sure they're safe.
Okay, so it's kind of like having a referee to make sure everyone is playing by the rules. That makes sense.
Yeah, and that kind of transparency not only helps to reduce the risks, but it also builds trust. When the public can see that companies are being held accountable, they're more likely to actually embrace AI and see its potential benefits.
Transparency builds trust. I like that. But what about the incentives? How do we actually motivate companies to prioritize safety beyond just avoiding getting penalties?
Well, as we mentioned before, there's this idea of creating a tiered system where companies with more robust safety policies get certain perks.
Right, like that gold standard for AI safety. But what would those perks actually look like? Are we talking like tax breaks, government contracts, bragging rights?
All of those are possibilities. The document suggests that governments could offer financial incentives, like tax breaks or grants, to companies that show a real commitment to safety.
So basically rewarding them for doing the right thing. That makes sense. What other kind of incentives are mentioned?
Another idea is to create some kind of public recognition system, like a certification program, where companies that meet certain safety standards can display like a seal of approval or something like that.
Ah, so kind of like a good housekeeping seal of approval,
Mhm.
but for AI. I like that. It's a way for companies to signal, hey, we're committed to safety, and maybe even attract more customers or investors.
Exactly. It's all about making sure that doing the right thing isn't just ethically sound, but it actually makes good business sense.
It's like safety cells. But incentives aside, what about the actual details of the regulations themselves? How do we make sure those are clear and concise and easy to follow, like the document is recommending?
Well, that's where this principle of simplicity and focus comes in. The goal is to have regulations that are very straightforward, easy for everyone to understand, from the AI developers to the policymakers to the average person on the street.
Because if the rules are too complicated, no one is going to follow them. It's just going to create confusion and loopholes for companies to take advantage of.
Exactly. The document emphasizes that AI regulations should be laser-focused on the most critical risks. We don't want to get bogged down in all this unnecessary bureaucracy or technical jargon.
So keep it simple, keep it focused, and keep it effective. That sounds like a good mantra for any kind of regulation, not just AI.
Right. And just as importantly, they need to be adaptable. The world of AI is constantly changing, so we have to make sure the regulations can actually keep pace with those changes.
So we're not just setting a bunch of rules in stone and calling it a day. We need to be constantly evaluating and adjusting as these new challenges come up.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't a one-and-done kind of situation. It's a process that requires constant dialogue and collaboration between everyone involved. Policymakers, industry experts, researchers, and the public.
It sounds like this document is advocating for a very dynamic approach, then, to AI regulation, one that's constantly evolving and adapting to this ever-changing landscape.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's not about trying to predict every possible risk or every possible scenario, but it's about creating a flexible framework that can respond to these new challenges as they emerge.
So it's less about specific rules and more about setting these core principles and guidelines.
Exactly. It's about setting a clear direction for how AI should be developed and used, while still allowing for that flexibility and innovation. And remember that ticking clock we keep talking about. What's a reminder? That we don't really have time to waste. We need to start having these conversations now and working together to find those solutions. That can balance the progress with the need for safety.
Well, I think this deep dive has given our listeners a lot to think about. We've explored the potential of AI, but we've also talked about some very real risks that come along with it. And we've discussed some of the key steps we can take to try to make sure that AI is developed and used responsibly.
It's a complex issue, and there are no easy answers. But by engaging in these conversations, staying informed, and making our voices heard, we can all help to shape the future of AI in a way that actually benefits all of humanity.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive into the world of AI and its implications for our future. We hope you found this conversation both informative and thought-provoking.
It's been a pleasure to talk about this important topic with you, and we encourage all of our listeners to keep learning and engaging with this conversation about AI, because ultimately the future is in our hands, and it's up to all of us to make sure that AI is a force for good in the world.
And for those of you who want to delve even deeper into this topic, we've included links to all the sources that we've mentioned down in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay informed.